Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patty Lago, and I'm a program manager with McMaster University Continuing Education. We are delighted to welcome you all to our wonderful Essential Programs webinar, From Facts to Stories, Discovering Your Communication Superpower. Our aim with Essential Programs is to engage, inspire, and support lifelong learning and discovery. So we're really excited to have you all join us and to be able to share further information. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we reside. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it's located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, I am joined with our facilitator, the amazing Christine Costa. Christine is a seasoned human resource professional, organization development consultant, and facilitator with over 20 years of experience in various roles and industries, including financial services, technology, and higher education. Christine holds an MBA from McMaster University and is passionate about continuous learning. She has spent her career coaching leaders and teams to help them reach their full potential. Christine is currently an entrepreneur and an owner of Christine Connects, a professional training and facilitation practice that helps people create connections with their teams, themselves, and their environment. Christine has been a facilitator teaching at both the high school and the university levels and is currently an instructor with McMaster Continuing Education. In her spare time, she loves making music and spending time in nature. As an active and valued member of McMaster Continuing Education community, Christine presently is an assigned instructor teaching within our essential programs, such courses as Unconscious Bias, How We Make Decisions, Cultivate Belonging with Personality Dimensions, Strengthening Communications Through Storytelling, with this webinar actually resonating with the learnings of this course that is scheduled in fall of 2024 on Thursday and Friday, December 5th and 6th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Other courses and essentials that Christine facilitates would include managing in a unionized environment, unconscious bias, moving from bystander to advocate. She also teaches within our Human Resource Management program as the assigned instructor for HRM 901 Human Resource Management course. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Christine. So over to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Patty, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us and explore this great topic of storytelling. So Patty was so kind enough to share a little bit about me. And of course, because we're talking about facts and storytelling, you can see all the different facts about me, but I can also add a little bit of color to it as well. So as Patty explained, and if you don't know me, I have been a human resources professional for over 20 years in a variety of roles. And I've just always been really interested in explaining complex things to other people and just making sense of the world around us. I pursued my MBA at McMaster. And in my time there, I really had this affinity of all my HR courses and some of the co-op opportunities that I had in human resources. And I found it really great as a way to apply teaching and learning in this professional context. So I had the opportunity of working in both public and private sector. And I've learned a lot about myself in these roles and just about other people. So I feel like now I've come full circle in being fortunate enough to make this a full-time role for myself. And last year, starting my own company. So I focus on professional training, facilitation, and really excited to do that through McMaster Continuing Education and Conestoga College. And I partner with a number of other organizations to deliver training as well. So you'll also notice that I'm a singer. I'm going to weave that in a little bit today, but I really do love music. And I just find that it's another way, another medium to tell a story, right? Kind of a fun fact, I do judge singing competitions. And I find some common feedback I give is, tell me the story. I don't know what the story is that you're telling me. And so what do I mean by that? Think about your favorite artist or your favorite song. Why are you so connected to that song? Is it the lyrics? Is it the music itself? But what is it about the singer and the song and the story that it's telling you? So we'll continue to explore that a little bit today. And Patty was fortunate enough to provide us our land acknowledgement. And as you read that, and as you heard Patty read that, that may resonate with you, right? I can also tell you a little bit more information if you are unaware, but the dish with one spoon represents the first treaty made on Turtle Island, which represents today North America. And that represents a covenant with nature. You might find that interesting to know, but how about I take that a step further and frame it a little bit more in terms of a story? Again, being our theme today. That dish with one spoon is, you can think of it as a metaphor for the shared territory and the resources among different Indigenous nations. So the dish representing the land in which the nations share. So particularly the area of the Great Lakes region. And I've come to understand it's about taking what you need, leaving something in the dish for others, and keeping that dish clean. And the one spoon signifying the way in which we must share those resources. So specifically, it's a spoon and not a knife or a fork, symbolizing the peaceful nature of that sharing. So not having a sharp object, which could potentially represent conflict. So understanding more about the story, why we recognize and do this land acknowledgement, hopefully for you adds context. And it provides a powerful example of how Indigenous peoples have long practiced sophisticated forms of diplomacy and sustainable living. And hopefully it continues to inspire all of us and our efforts toward reconciliation and environmental justice. So storytelling in this case hopefully helps to enhance, again, your understanding, maybe inspire some action, and just generally sharing of knowledge. And it's important in so many different environments, right? Like education, definitely business. And you were all motivated to join this webinar today. I would love to know, in what context, in what environment are you looking to tell stories? So let me illustrate just a couple of examples of how we can take some of these facts, and mainly from a business or professional context. So data influences how we might perceive a topic. Again, it may motivate us to action, but there's always a story in the numbers, right? So I can present you with some data, and already this is graphed, so it already is starting to tell you a little bit of a story, but just acknowledging that, if I had just given you a chart of numbers, that's not really meaningful to us. So numbers and data are a great example. We need to put it in context to help us understand, what's the point of it? What do I need to do with this information? So think about it if you are presenting this to your supervisor or maybe a senior executive. How might this inform their decision making? If you look at this particular graph, it might start to signal to you there's a general downward trend of rentals for BMWs. But the other lines kind of clutter. You don't really know maybe what it's supposed to be telling you. So ultimately, whoever's looking at this might have a bit of a harder time trying to interpret, what do I do with this? So the superpower here, right, is being able to tell the story. What does this mean? And so, stories, again, that help us understand what the numbers are. And so this is just an example. Visually now, and there's a statement behind it, BMWs are down 85% while competitors hold firm. Now it's providing you more insight and visually as well. They did a great job as well in terms of being able to provide that interpretation. So I've recently read the rate at which the brain processes images 60 times faster than just reading words. That's fascinating. There's another study as well with some Stanford students. They were asked to share facts with their classmates. And 63% remembered the stories behind those facts, and only 5% remembered the actual statistics that were cited. So think back to even when you were in school, what did you remember? It was probably around the stories around what you were learning. So let's look at a different example. And I'll just wait there. I'm going to show you a quick video, but just to illustrate another example. So that's one with data. This is another one from a business and marketing perspective. So this will be Subaru, a car manufacturer you might be familiar with. They are in the business of selling cars. And, like everyone, they could provide us a commercial with some great facts about the cars, right? About safety and mileage, you name it. And don't get me wrong, it's important to know that information. That may help you make a decision for sure. But what motivates you to actually buy that car? Or what connection do you have even with that car? Well, in this case, marketers at Subaru wanted to make a connection with their potential buyers and customers with a powerful story. So I just get you to watch this quick video. It's even about 10 years old, but it's called Making Memories.
Turning in the grain again, the bells began to chime. Time, she says, there's no turning back.
You can pass down a Subaru Forester.
She's all yours.
But you get to keep the memories.
Love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
Yeah, so it starts to kind of pull at your heartstrings, maybe, right? And if, especially if you associate being a father or a dad, you might be the ideal buyer that Subaru was looking for. And, you may feel more connected with that car. And you might just even want to learn a little bit more about it. So Dr. Pam Rutledge, in this quote that I've provided, she's a media psychologist who points out that humans have always been storytellers, and you likely know this. I mean, I remember my own dad telling me old stories about the tortoise and the hare, all of these different stories to illustrate and teach, really big life lessons, and just share life's meaning. So stories have been used for thousands of years, just to chronicle life, right? To communicate information, social norms, and sometimes to entertain and to inspire. So it's really, and looking at that quote, it's how we think, right? We make meaning of life through schemas and scripts and cognitive maps, metaphors, and stories are how we explain how things work, how we make decisions, how we persuade others, how we understand our place in the world, creating identities, and define and teach social values as well. So why are stories so powerful? So you might be wondering that. Well, a lot of research shows that it helps us think, right? It helps us communicate, understand information. And we saw in the examples that just provided, right? It helps make information more memorable. And so when you're telling a story, your listeners, and you are doing this, hopefully over this last little bit already, you were, creating that imagery in your mind, maybe evoking some emotions. And that all helps make something more memorable and stay with you. So whether you're presenting something to your teams, your clients, your customers, the community, and that may stay with them for years to come. And it helps us make a connection, right? Research does show that stories increase a person's empathy and their compassion as well. And it's just how we understand the world, right? They stir those emotions in us. They might help us change our mind, inspire us to action. And we've probably, again, all heard many stories around the dinner table with family. It conveys culture, history, values. It helps to unite us. And it helps us maybe understand a different perspective as well. And as mentioned, it helps us understand really abstract concepts, maybe simplifying messages as well. And hopefully even just connecting it to something that we already understand. But it's all about science too. It impacts our brain. So, I've mentioned a lot that stories just appeal to our heart, but the effects of stories actually start in our head. So researchers have discovered that when we hear a story, our brains release two important chemicals, cortisol and oxytocin. And so why does that matter? Well, cortisol is actually responsible to help increase our focus, our attention, right? We're more aware and more focused on that story. And that's, important to just pay attention, right, to someone's story. And it might be the reason too, you stop, scrolling on Instagram or Facebook when you come across something that looks intriguing and looks like a good story. The second chemical is oxytocin. And in business and in life, we want to connect with people. And that oxytocin is sometimes known as the trust hormone. And it's what makes us feel and experience empathy and, again, connection with others. So lots of science about that. And in our strengthening communications course, we get into a little bit more about the science behind stories. And so hopefully you're starting to think about how can you use stories as a communication superpower? Well, in hopefully you're connecting that it's the way you deliver it, right? So making those abstract ideas more relatable, understandable. Maybe it is about evoking emotions, not always, but it helps make something more memorable again, right? You might need to be providing some background, just show that connection to someone's work, how they might use a particular product. It might help gain buy-in for something that you're trying to persuade or again, get someone to engage in action. And engaging in storytelling, right? People they understand different experiences, different perspectives from their own, hopefully, again, fostering that empathy and social understanding. So hopefully you start to see that you can add a lot of value through storytelling, and it can be really simple. I mean, you're adding value because you're putting the pieces of the puzzle together for someone. So thinking back to that data example, you can show someone too on how they use your product, your service, your research, and even just making really, complex business communications a bit more clear and compelling. So, I looked at one example, a business leader, let's take a case where maybe a CEO wants to create buy-in by sharing an example of, why that company now needs to have a mission around sustainability, right? You might have a very strong goal about reducing carbon footprint by 50% over the next 5 years. Great. But when, employees might hear that, they could be a bit skeptical, feeling, oh, where is that new direction going to take us? Is it going to lead to increased workload? But being able to tell a story might help provide, again, understanding, being memorable. And so that CEO might start recounting a personal story from their childhood, maybe growing up near a river that was once clean and then became polluted over the years due to industrial waste, and sharing that experience and now how that CEO has a lifelong commitment to environmental stewardship. Maybe it's connecting that personal story again to the company's history, showing that connection and examples of maybe how the company has adapted to challenges over the years and innovated. So being able to provide, it can be a vivid picture for how that company will benefit the planet for future generations. So through storytelling, that particular case of a CEO can align the strategic goals for that company, maybe connect it to the personal values of the employees that work there. Again, inspiring them, potentially motivating them, committing people and gaining that buy-in for that initiative. So there's lots of examples, and you provided, examples of how you could use storytelling. So it can be in education, right? Teachers using stories to introduce new topics, making learning just more engaging, more fun too. In business, and again, we had a few of those examples. Being able to tell a story, contextualize products, services, how I use this, connect with consumers in a personal level. And it may be from an advocacy perspective as well. Being able to communicate and have people connect with social issues, making them more relatable, compelling people to action. So many great reasons. And so how can you develop this superpower? And I'm sure that's what motivated a lot of you to come to learn about that today. Think about that most memorable story or a memorable story, any memorable story that you've heard recently. And it could be true or not, but what made you remember it? Was it how it was told? Was it who told it? Maybe where it was told? right? Was it an idea? And so to develop it, there's, a number of aspects to it. One, it takes a little bit of creativity, right? It's an art. And so being able to create maybe memorable characters, using that vivid imagery we talked about, metaphors, tailoring those communications to your audience. There's so many innovative mediums and formats that we can use with video, visual presentations, right? There is a creativity around storytelling. And then it's important to have a vision. So why are you telling this story? What's the purpose? What's the direction of your story? What do you want to inspire? So being able to really hone in on that and understand that, what do you hope to be achieved by telling your story? So giving it meaning, and especially if you're maybe a leader or someone in a position of influence. And then really it's a skill. So how you convey the message can be done with some really structured tips and tricks and strategies, how to do that in an engaging way, to craft that really clear message. And again, techniques that help tap into your audience's emotions. Maybe it's about, again, distilling those ideas to help them understand. And those are really practical skills that you can tap into. And then, like any skill and even any art, and I'd even connect with my own passion for singing, it requires practice to do it well, right? To learn about yourself, to be an authentic storyteller, it is about focusing on that skill and requires practice for us to all improve. So if you want to learn more about strengthening that superpower and communication superpower, as Patty mentioned, we have the ESS 817 course coming up in December. It's over 2 days, and I will take you through various components of storytelling. So we'll walk through a process to help you develop your own story and go over a number of techniques, tips, and there are many, but I've chosen ones that really resonate, especially from a business and professional context. So things like, thinking about your audience and how, what is the purpose of your story? How you can simplify your message to really make it effective. So in this course, over those 2 days, you'll have the opportunity to build that story and further develop that superpower. And we'll also talk about considerations, because there are common mistakes that can be made. And there's also ethical considerations that need to be thought of as well. So we'll work through that all in that course. So, if you're interested in that course, really, who should attend? Any professional seeking to build their communication skills. It could be a communication specialist. Maybe that's specifically your area of expertise, maybe to refresh your skills. But really, we all communicate in our roles. And personally, we communicate all the time. So really, these skills can apply to virtually anyone. And just before I close off, I just want to invite Patty, if there's anything like specifically or logistically that you want to add in about the course. Registration is currently open.
Yeah, so if people are interested, as per the link that's shown on this slide, simply go onto our website. It's a pretty straightforward process. You would go to the ESS 817. There will be an enroll button that you would click on. Remember the course code, please, and enter that course code, and then just simply follow the correct prompts. And so we do currently accept registrations, I should say, for this course 3 days prior. So it is scheduled on December 5th. So the last date to enroll will be 3 days prior to that, December 2nd. So we really hope some of you will come out and join us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so to end off the formal portion of the webinar, I just want to share a song and maybe a little quote. There we go.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows, and what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions, and rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been
So I share that as a recording I made of a song called Rainbow Connection. So not sure if you've heard of it, but it's a beautiful song that's been covered many, many times by many talented singers. And to many people and to myself, I find that's a song about finding yourself and following your dreams. So you might recognize it from a song called The Muppet Movie. It came out in 1978, that old already. And I did a little bit of reading. Let me just pause that. And the writers of the song wanted to write something that would capture what was happening with one of the lead characters. So you might recognize him, Kermit the Frog. He's pictured there. And in the movie, at this point, he actually decides to leave the swamp in which he grew up to follow his dream of being a star. And he did that and ended up making millions of people really happy with his gift over the years. So the writers really did a wonderful job of capturing emotion and the imagination of the story in that song. So for me, I felt called to record it for my 1-year-old nephew as a lullaby, as a song to help convey to him just to believe in himself and to follow his dreams. So I hope that he will remember it as a sentiment over the years, as a way, to remember that song. And again, that sentiment, I could tell him those words, but I'm sure that will be a more meaningful way for him to remember the story. So definitely remember that we all have a story to tell. And, people will forget facts, but they will remember the stories and how we tell them. So I do want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Please enjoy the rest of summer 2024. Stay safe and enjoy the beautiful weather that we continue to have. And thank you.
Great. Thank you.